Hey there guys, Bostowo here. Today I just wanted to give my thoughts on the Avon FM53. I'm also going to change up the format a little bit by putting a TLDR right here at the start. In my opinion, the Avon FM53 is not going to be what most of you are looking for. This thing is definitely a special purpose mask for those with special needs. So while it's got some legitimately impressive capabilities, for most people, you're not going to really need them. And instead, I would recommend just going with an Avon C50. However, if you do actually need the features that this thing plays nicely with, for instance, comms and a VPU at the same time, as well as a PAPR, then you know what, this thing is worth considering. So now I'd like to touch on some general notes about the mask. Now I'll start with the comfort and weight. It is very comfortable as well as lightweight. However, it's very bulky, especially in the front when you've got this voice projection unit on. As you can see, it hangs very far off the face. The specific butyl blend that this is made of, I believe it's butyl, is very comfortable while still offering a high level of chemical resistance. Another thing of note is that it does have some very minor balance issues, so you'll have to play around with the head harness a little bit just to make sure that it stays stable. The stability issues are most present when you're wearing a heavy canister, so something like a C2A1. Something like this Impertech P3 though isn't gonna make it too bad. Also, using a PAPR will take the weight off of your face, so that improves the stability quite a bit. And the final thing I'd like to note before we get into the specifics of this mask is that there are several variants. This is specifically an M53, so it was made for a US military contract. There is also the M53A1, which has a improved VPU, and you can tell it's the M53A1 by the battery cap. And there's also the FM54, which has its hardware hardened so that it can survive a fire more easily. The difference between an M53 and an FM53 is solely the fact that an M53 is made for the US military, while an FM53 is made for any other military or just for civilian use. So yeah, it's different in designation only. So why don't we start looking at the actual components? As per usual, we'll start out with the lens. It's a very high quality and pliable lens with an excellent field of vision. There is also no visual distortion, which is good because some other panoramic masks have it. Also, it uses the same outsert mounting system as the M50 JSGPM, and so you can just use the outserts from that on one of these. It's a very secure mounting system that I really like. It's also very simple and easy to use. The outserts come in just standard clear like this, as well as tinted and a myriad of other colors like blue blocker orange or laser protective green, as well as a breaching torch like giga tinted, really. Moving away from that, let's talk about the port. It's your standard NATO Stanag threaded port, so you'll be able to use pretty much any filter you'll find in the West, for lack of a better term. The inlet valve seals perfectly, so there's no chance of air passing back through your filter. My example is a little bit scratched up on the port here, because that's where the serial number used to be, and this one seems to have fallen off of a military truck. Normally, these are made with only one port on one side. Mine does not have a right side port, but they do indeed make a version with two filter ports. But with one of these single port ones, you should make sure that you're getting one with the filter on the correct side. Now, let's move on from the ports to this mask beard. Personally, I'd prefer for it to be longer, but it does work just fine keeping your hood in place. It just makes sure it stays sealed, and if there's any sort of chemical drip, it doesn't, well, get to you. Up here, you've got the hood mounting point. I personally use this thing with a quicked-off hood, but it does have its own proprietary hood. That hood has a little strap that holds it to the mask very tightly, and that interfaces right here. Since I've not really used the hood, I don't have an opinion on it, although it looks good. It's a Gore Chempack material, if I recall correctly, so it's going to be lightweight and I believe fairly breathable. But like I said, I haven't used one, so I'll refrain from going too in-depth on it. Now let's talk about this whole frontal unit. This right here is called the valve cassette assembly, and within it is your exhale valve. Specifically, this is a VREU, or variable resistance exhalation unit. So in particular, what that does is it switches your mask from positive and negative pressure modes so that it's safer to use with a PAPR. So in simpler terms, this just makes it so that it's harder to exhale through your exhale valve when it's in this position, so that if your mask happens to inflate, your exhale valve doesn't just hang open and let in any contaminated air. Instead, the mask will inflate and shoot the air from inside out through the peripheral seal. So that makes it just a little bit safer to use a PAPR. When the VREU is in the upward position, it goes back to normal and there's no noticeable exhalation resistance. So if you use a PAPR, like I do sometimes, this thing is going to be very useful. However, it is what gives this thing most of its bulk. On my M53, I've got one of these little control levers, but not all of them have it. Now, this control lever lets you actually switch the VREU from its pressure modes while the VPU is in place. Without one, you would need to actually take the VPU off to change the mode of the VREU. Speaking of the VPU, this is it. As you can see, it's a very compact design, which is nice since the M53 already hangs so far off your face. It runs off of a single CR123 battery that inserts into this port on the side. It doesn't have its own internal mic and instead relies on a microphone within the M53. That's what this 3-prong connector is for. It plugs into your electronic communications port. And while I'm talking about that, I should point out that there is a 2-prong port on there, which allows you to plug your communications headset into there. So yes, you can indeed use both communications gear and a voice projection unit at the same time, and it's done in a very sleek way that I just love. Installing the VPU is simple. First, you take your lever and put it a little bit that way. Then you take your VPU, set it on the VCA, and then rotate it a little bit to the right until you hear it click. And then you plug this into the hole. Once it's on there, you can take this little lever on the front and move it to the downwards position, which turns on the voice projection unit. Removal is also very easy. You just depress this little spoon here and then rotate to the left. It's hard to do with one hand, so I'm not going to do it. Even though it is very easy to take off and put on, it is a little bit more difficult to do than taking off and putting on the M50's VPU. But that's not exactly a bad thing, since they were designed with different purposes in mind. The M53's VPU was meant to stay on just all the time. The M50's VPU was meant to be taken off when you're done using the mask and then put on when you're using it again. That's why in the 50 series carriers, there's that little elastic loop way in the back. And personally, I've never done that. When I put my M50 in its carrier, I just leave the VPU on. So what I'm saying is I very much prefer the M53's VPU. Speech transmission quality through the VPU is very high. It's about on level with an M50, so, it's good. On the other hand, passive speech transmission, so with the VPU turned off, is quite muffled. Because of that, I would very much recommend always using the VPU with this thing. Now we can talk about our hydration system. It's got a very long hose that is stowed pretty competently around the entire VCA. I do wish it were just a tiny bit shorter, not for any sort of legitimate reason, but because when you stow it properly, let me get that like that, it kind of isn't even with the other side, so it's no, that's just terrible. I hate that. So, like I said, it's not a legitimate reason, but still. It has a Type A drinking adapter here, so you can very easily get a canteen or a Camelback adapter to use this thing with. Also, it gives you this little gripping point at the end here so that it's much more easy to remove from a canteen or camelback adapter, and there is no way for you to really accidentally grab onto the hose and somehow rip it. Fluid transmission speed is quite good. It's definitely better than the older Type M drinking systems. On the bottom here, you've got your admittedly very stiff drinking tube control lever. It controls this little straw on the inside. Here it is in the stowage position, and here it is in the drinking position. It actually does lock the drinking system down when you put it back in stowage, so there's no chance of contaminated air passing through it. Also, the position of the straw is quite nice. It just puts it right into your mouth. And I believe that's all there is to talk about up in front. So why don't we move to the head harness? As you can see, it is a 6-point skull cap design, so it's very, very comfortable. On the bottom of the rear of the head harness, you can see that it's got a donning loop. So if you carry it with the head harness folded over the front of the mask, as you should, then it's very quick to pull over your head. But I do have some qualms with the head harness. Mainly, I do not like these hook and loop forehead straps. They make it so that you have to use a 50 series head harness, and you know, some people aren't going to like this, or they're going to want to get a different one. But something that's arguably a bigger issue is these little head harness tabs here. They don't have any sort of buckle. Instead, the head harness just loops through it. And I have seen these rip even though they are reinforced with plastic. And if one of them does rip, you need an entirely new face piece if you can't repair it, which you probably won't be able to. So while it's not likely that that would happen, it is possible. This is less of an issue, but more of a personal gripe. The M50 uses these really excellent plastic buckles on these straps, but for some reason the M53 goes back to this type of buckle, this metal one, that the United States military has been using since World War I. I mean, here they are on an M45. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, they're perfectly good buckles. They work, that's why they lasted 100 years, but why the M50 buckles are just better? I wish they didn't do that. But yeah, they really are just fine. I just wish they went with the more modern buckles. I think that's everything I wanted to say about the outside, so let's take a peek inside the interior. We can start off with the peripheral seal. It is a completely fine design. It's good and it works well. It's just the classic inch or two of inverted rubber that just, well, grips your face pretty nicely. You've also got this little chin cup that does a very good job and has a little moisture drain. Speaking of draining moisture, while it does have the moisture drain there, the exhale valve is of course located on the front, meaning that this has no passive moisture drainage. So to actually get the moisture out of your mask, you have to look forward with your mask hanging down and then it'll drain. And that is a little annoying, honestly. Here on the M45, the mask that the M53 replaced, it does have this bottom-mounted exhale valve, meaning that it has very good passive moisture drainage. So now we can move on to the Oronasal Cup. It's very comfortable. I believe it's made out of some sort of silicone, but I don't know that for sure. Don't quote me. But it does have the Avon style hole in the top, which I don't like. I do notice some very minor fogging issues that get exacerbated, particularly in sub-zero temperature, which honestly that can be said about any mask, not just this. So yeah, it's fine, really. It's quite comfortable, but I wish they had a valve instead of a hole. And now we can talk about the optical inserts. These use the same inserts as the M50. It is a 3-point mounting system with an arm going over there, an arm going over there, and a little peg and hole in the center. I've currently got, as you can see, a pair of civilian glasses with the arms removed, just zip tied to the insert frame, which works decently well for me, because I don't feel like going over to the optician, that's the word? Yeah. To go and buy lenses for this. I just don't feel like doing that. But yeah, so these glasses inserts are easy to find and very secure. And with that, I believe I am done looking at the individual components. And so we will ask the usual question. Is this thing worth it? For most people, no. Get a C50 instead. However, if you need a PAPR and you need comms and VPU at the same time, then I would say it's worth considering, but also definitely if you don't use a PAPR, this thing is not as useful as you'd think. And by that what I mean is when I go out on hikes wearing a mask and I don't want to bring a PAPR with me, I don't grab this thing. I don't just use this thing in APR mode. I'll usually grab my M50 or M45. And yeah, these are quite expensive. I'm not even gonna lie to you. These are really expensive. So for most people, no, don't buy one of these. If you do want to buy one of these, you can get them fairly easily on the surplus market. They're still going to be expensive though. And I know a lot of people don't trust surplus, but if you're doing your regular preventative maintenance checks and services, then it'll work just as well as any new production mask. But if you're really averse to buying surplus, Avon does have a whole bunch of licensed retailers all over the United States, or really the Western world. And if you want one of those, I don't have a list on hand, just go and Google buy Avon FM53 or something. But yeah, lately I see them going for about $800 on the surplus market, or close to double that if it's from a licensed retailer. But yeah, so my final conclusion here is buy a C50 instead. Anyhow, thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry that it's been like 2 months since I last uploaded a full-length video. It's just been so hard to find the time to actually record one of these since I've got college and all that. Oh, and the new HS Coverco series is still being actively worked on. The first episode is almost done, but it's probably gonna be another month or two before the first episode even goes live. I'm sorry about that. I'm just trying to make sure that I've got all 3 episodes recorded before I even post the first one. But again, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one, whenever that is.